Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Thank you for being here. We will be covering St. John chapter 2. See here. Are y'all still seeing the screen or no? Okay.
It's there now.
Okay. Let's start off with verse 1.
Okay. John chapter 2, verse 1. And the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Yahushua was there, or the Messiah.
Okay. Now we're going to stop that there because it says, and the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee. So we know we're dealing with a town called Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Yahushua was there. We are just going to take a little look because what we want to see is where how Yahushua was and why they calling it the third day. Now, some of us can take that. We know what the seventh day is. The seventh day is what? The Sabbath.
The Sabbath.
And we call the days. And so the first day would be Sunday. The second day would be Monday. And the third day would be Tuesday. But are we talking about this here? So we're going to just take a look so we can establish that we're talking about the third day from actually an event that took place, not necessarily that this was on a Tuesday that this wedding was taking place. And how do we do that? We're going to go back to the previous chapter to see what was being said here. We're going to go back to verse 19. And Priest Plum did an excellent job on this. And we see at 19, and it says, go ahead.
And this is the record of John, when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who art thou?"
Okay, so Jews and priests were sent to ask John who he was, and they were sent from Jerusalem. So that was the first day that we were talking about, and we're going to go to 35 and read that one.
Again, the next day after John stood and two of his disciples.
So the next day after that, which these Jews, when they sent priests to John to inquire of who he was, that was brought out in Qualms. It was a question about who he was, if he was Elias. And the question was raised, why are you baptizing? Because they noticed something different that was going on. And he was talking about he baptized with water. Let's read 39.
He said unto them, "Come and see me." They came and saw where he dwelt and abode with him that day, for it was about the 10th hour.
Okay, so that same day, we established the first day, and that same day, he told them to come and see where he dwelt and he abode. So now that was from the first day, it was the next day. So on 35 and 39, that was the second day. So now we're going to look at 43, verse 43 there, and we're going to get another day. The day.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
The day following, Yahushua would go forth into Galilee and find Philip and said unto him, "Follow me."
Okay, now we see here the next day. Now this is 3 days from that day, the third day from which those Pharisees came and the priests came to John to inquire of who he is. Are we seeing that? So now we're in that third day. Now we see the day following, Yahushua would go forth unto Galilee. And we just read who's in Galilee? In Cana of Galilee. That was Yahushua mother is there. So now we can see that Yahushua is going to be going to where Mary is. And it says in Galilee, because Christ went to Galilee, he found Philip and he said, follow me. So I'm just establishing now you have Mary in Galilee and you have Christ in Galilee. Now we're going to go back and see how they got together. Christ was picking his disciples. And now when you read it, say, and the third day, there was a marriage. So when he got those disciples that he got from that point, he was in Galilee. And it's in Cana of Galilee, and there the mother of Yahushua was there. So Yahushua is getting his disciples. Now, verse 2, let's get some more. So go ahead.
And both Yahushua was called and his disciples to the marriage.
Okay. Now, what we want to look at here, it said both Yahushua was called and his disciples to the marriage. What is that telling us, though? That both Yahushua. Now, we had at this point, Yahushua didn't even have all of his disciples. He had picked in that first chapter, you see where he picked John, he picked Andrew, Peter, Philip, and Nathaniel. That's basically in the next chapter. Let's take we're going to go back over there. That's from 40 to 45, and I'm gonna hit that real quick. So we can see he didn't have all of his disciples, and it's a conclusion I'm gonna draw from this. So Christ was picking out his disciples, and remember, all of them except one was from Galilee. Okay, so he had 40. It said one of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, which we said, Simon, Peter's brother. He first findeth his own brother, Simon, and saith unto him, we have found the Messiah, which is being interpreted to Christ. So he's picking his disciples, going on, and he brought forth him to Jesus. And when Yahushua held him, he said, thou art Simon, the son of Bar-Jonah, thou shalt be called Cephas, which is by interpretation of stone. So the only thing I'm establishing here is that he was getting his disciples. This was the beginning of him choosing who his disciples would be. And then we got down here, Nathaniel, which we were talking about. And Nathaniel inquired that question, is there any good thing that comes out of Nazareth? And he said, indeed, an Israelite where there is no guile. So we're going to go back. So here is Yahushua busy with gathering his disciples. Are we seeing that? This is what he's about. But Mary, his mother, was at a wedding. Are we seeing that? Now, why I want you to see that, and it said both Yahushua was called and his disciples to the marriage. Then what can you gather from that? Do you gather that they were invited to this wedding? Because remember, he didn't even have his disciples, and it said both Yahushua and his disciples were called. Some will determine by this that they were invited. So how are you going to invite something that is just coming into the existence? Remember, on that third day, he picked those disciples that were with him. He was in the process of gathering. So what most likely happened was just as it said. Yahushua was called and his disciple. They were on a journey. And by his mother was there, saw them. And we're going to get to this because I don't want it to be presumed that I'm adding too much, and said, hey, because she had a need. Yahushua, and those which you would come over here. Is that possible? Are you seeing that in both Yahushua was called and his disciples, not knowing who those disciples were, how could they be invited? Christ was choosing them randomly as the Father disclosed who should be with him. They were chosen before the foundation of the world. It wasn't even determined at that time who his disciples would be. So this called is not, they had a invitation that him and his disciples, and the point is being made that they didn't have this pre-invitation to come. Like if you and I were going to a wedding, you would get some kind of invitation to show up at some date. The point is trying to point that this was a random thing. It wasn't a plan or invite. And are you seeing it? And they didn't even know who the disciples would be, Christ's disciples, to invite them. He had none except that day. Are we seeing that? And then those that were with him, that list was not even complete. He had only chose at that time 4, and he had 12 to go. So that's what we're talking about. He had Andrew, Peter, Philip, John, it was 5, and John and Nathaniel. So he had only chose 5 out of the 12. That list was not complete. Okay. So here, the acquaintance that we know, we had his mother there, and it wouldn't be far-fetched to see to it that his mother, which we're going to see, had him come over because she knew him. She was there, and that was her son. So both Jesus was called and his disciples to come to the marriage. So let me continue. Mary also, we will see, had a need of something. We're going to see that there was a need in a wine, and she knew her son. Now, wine was used ceremoniously. It was used for celebration, and it was used for municipal purpose. And here, basically, a wedding was a feast, was one of those celebrations that we as a people would have wine for myrrh, for enjoyment. And so let's go on to verse and see if this will unfold. Verse 3.
And when they wanted wine, the mother of Yahushua said unto him, they have no wine.
Okay. Now the disciples came over. It was a celebration. Like I said, that was one of the things we customarily had at our celebrations, at our religious ceremonies, a little bit of wine for the belly, and we use for municipal purpose. And they say when they wanted wine. We have other versions of the Bible. One is the Revised Version, say when the wine failed. So they were running out of wine, or they were out of wine. But we know that when they wanted wine, the mother of Yahushua said unto him, they have no wine. So who was they that wanted the wine? Those disciples that came over. Go ahead.
I was saying the guest at the
and
The
the guests,
ceremony.
right? The guests at the ceremony had wanted wine because they were running out. The revision is that they were running out. Now, normally, if you have wine there and you finish with that wine and you want some more wine, what do? Just get some. But they had servers there. So here, when the disciples came over, they were unable to give them some wine. And those that had wine that wanted more, those guests that wanted more wine, they're looking around. You know, where is the wine? They're being slow, you know, on this wine. We've all been there, you know. And then there was the guests that were to come. So here they're failing in having this celebratory drink to join in. So we got a problem. And that's not, and Mary went and talked to Yahushua about this difficulty. We ain't got no wine. What's going to happen with a bunch of Hebrews and you run out of wine? There's going to be a disruption. There's going to be a discontent. There's going to be some talk, and it's going to be an embarrassment on the party that is having the celebration, that they weren't prepared to even deal with the people that was there. The food ran out. We will see what, if you've ever been to an event where the food ran out, you see how we act. We get, it's a situation. So Mary recognized this, saw Yahushua, got him over there. Even his disciples coming there was expecting the wine, and it wasn't there. So Mary was presenting this to Jesus. They have no wine. Okay, are we seeing that? Okay, and this would have been a problem. There would have been a stir. You know how we do. We talking about us. So Mary was
murmuring.
Huh? Yeah, murmuring.
I said murmuring.
Absolutely.
We good for that.
We good for it. So Mary was hoping to receive something of her son. Perhaps him granting a miracle, but she was definitely looking for him to do something about this deficit. Now, can you see why he got called over? And they that was with him. Mary was at a wedding. If you can see this, Christ was about his Father's will. He was about gathering his disciples. Mary was at a wedding. Christ was gathering his disciples. Are we seeing that? But here, and we're going to see in his conversation, he's going to remind his mother of that. Okay, I just want you to follow this story, so because there's a lot of subtlety in when we're reading the scriptures that we're not looking at. And a lot of times we would think he was invited to this wedding. He was doing something else. He was out about gathering his disciples, but he was in the same place as where his mother was in the wedding. They were both in Galilee. Christ was on the move. He wasn't stagnant waiting for them. He was gathering his disciples. And it's important that you see that. Now let's go to the next verse.
Yahushua said unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet to come.
This is what lets you know, and Christ knowing all things, that he wasn't part of that. So Christ, number one, he's calling her woman. Woman, not mother, because his mind is someplace else. What he's saying, what have I to do with thee, with your will, with what you got going on? Because I must be about my Father's business. That's what he was about. So it's easy to miss this when he's saying woman. He wasn't sent so he could be directed, his power, by his mother to exercise. he was to submit unto the Father in all things, but yet here his mother, knowing him, had a need in hoping to guide this supernatural power, his glory, in the way that she saw fit. Are you seeing this? Because this is somewhat of a rebuke. When Yahweh said unto her, woman, what have I to do with thee? Are you catching that? Are you able to see why he said that? Because he wasn't looking at this point in his ministry as his mother, as his mother of his flesh. He was looking at his father will and being led by in the direction by his father, not Mary. So he was letting Mary know this, that, you know, him knowing all things, that she's not the one that's supposed to be leading him, but his father. So now what? It said, so what have I to do with thee? With this wedding, with what's going on here, with you trying to lead me and guide me. He said, for mine hour is not yet come. My hour for performing these miracles, he hadn't even completed his task with his 12. And then again, my hour has not come when I cannot be here, where I am to be taken up, where I can't help you. There's a dual meaning out of this. You are directing the time in which these miracles come forth. In my hour, what I intended to do is not now for me to show forth my glory, my power, but for me to gather my disciples. Are we seeing that? So he had to deal with it, but he's saying, I'm still here. I ain't gone yet. Yahweh Shai is still on the scene. I hadn't been taken up yet, so I can do something about this. I'm not gone. I hadn't sent the comforter. I am here. I am representative in the world. So, okay. Rebuke this mother. Let her know that she ain't the one that he's following, but is his father. Now his mother, knowing her son, his mother said, go ahead, verse 5.
His mother said unto the servants, whatsoever he say unto you, do it.
So his mother's still expecting, because he's full of mercy and grace. Even though she was trying to direct his power, he rebuked her. Still, he's on the scene and said his mother was expecting that Yahweh Shai would do something. Are we seeing that? Even though he was corrected, she was expecting, because he's full of mercy. Just like with the woman, when he said he that without sin cast the first stone. And then he said, neither do, he said, where are those that condemn you? And he said, neither do I. She knew that about her son more than everything. So she stood back. Okay. She took the rebuke and she's like, now prepare yourself, because he's going to do whatsoever he say, you do it. Are we seeing that? Let's go on to verse 6.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Good. You have something?
Just real quick. He also honored his mother at the end of the day. Honor your mother and your father.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's another commandment that he kept within that.
Con. Yeah. There was definitely no dishonor in that. And this is the thing, when we talk about the word, he wasn't sinning at this point when he was saying that when he called her woman. That was to direct us where his thoughts was when he was thinking about his heavenly father. So we know that he was out sin. I just want to bring up an example. Remember when Christ was teaching and preaching in the temple when he was 12. This is what we confuse offering. We confuse some actions as sin that are not sin. And that's the thing, because Yahushua, his parents didn't know where he was. He had stayed behind when they went in for the Passover, and he was preaching and teaching at 12. Now, we know that he was supposed to be under the subjection of his mother and father. But the question is, was he in sin when he was doing that? No. Even though
No, not at all.
he wasn't in sin at all. And that's what we do when things don't go down. He was not in sin because he was not where they wanted him to be. And it did not go down. They were displeased. Then it said he subjected himself unto them. And what we do a lot of time is something go down, we want to call it sin. It's not sin. Is it sin? Some people think it's sin if you rude, if you say something rude. Is that sin? Or did you speak rude? Where is thou shalt not speak rudely? Paul said, I speak rude, but some people attach sin to it. Now, when Christ went and drove them out of the temples, was that sin? Was that done in spite, hatred for his brother? It was for the love, which we will see is the love that he had, even though they were driven out. All things, this is because it's something that you don't like. Sin and hatred, those things are specific, what sin is. And you cannot attach the actions just because someone didn't say something or did something and say that it is sin. Sin is very specific when it's wrong or if it's against that which is the law. So here, Christ was committing no sin when he was talking to his mother. Is nothing. He wasn't not honor his mother by calling her woman, but he was making a statement to the world so we could understand where his mind was. It was on his father that he had long left, and he has told his mother before when they would call him. He said, "I must be about my father's business," and he was talking about his heavenly father, not Joseph. And you can look at that disrespectful, but that's with lack of understanding. That's not because he's speaking to the world, and he was speaking to those that there will come after the uttermost, so we could understand where his mind was, so we could understand what's going on inside. He didn't come here so he could be directed by his fleshly parents. He came here and was sent here before the Father, before the foundation of the world. He had mothers and he had earthly brothers, but ultimately, and he was a man at the time, he was sent here to subject himself to all things of the Father. And that's why he did that. So that wasn't in disrespect of his mother, but his mother, just as we have to understand who he was, the Messiah that he has come. And that's what he came to prove, his glory. He came to demonstrate his power, and his mother knew it better than anybody. That's why she called him there. That's why we're going over the expectation. She didn't call him there to do nothing. She called him over because he knew he could. And his mother is among those disciples and those who believe from the beginning. So we don't have to, the angel came unto her. So Mary knew what was going on. Mary wasn't in doubt. Con?
All praise.
Yeah, she knew better than the rest of them. And then even when he spoke in the temple, say she took note of those things because the angel came to her and told her who he was. She knows she didn't lay down with another man. Mary knew better than anybody else. So when Yahushua talked to her, she knew exactly who he was. So don't be feeling like Mary because she got rebuked that was a disrespect. It wasn't. That was the Most High, and that's why it that was in the Most High said all things that were made of him. who he was. That was established in chapter 1, who he was. And he came to what? Manifest his glory, who he was. By demonstration, the same thing. In the beginning, going back in Genesis, the Most High was manifesting his glory, so men would believe. He created the stars, the moon, and he said everything was good. And we looked on that and we were able to, he was saying, I exist and I want a relationship with you. This is the same thing. Now here's Yahushua coming on earth. He's manifesting his glory through signs and wonders in the fulfillment of prophecy, showing that he is who he said he is. Other than that, you wouldn't know. And that's why these men was asking what, well, let me go ahead. I'm getting into my lesson right now. So next verse, 6.
And there were set there 6 water pots of stone, after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece.
Okay, we're gonna stop there. So it said there were set 6 pots of stone, after the manner of purifying of the Jews. What does that mean? After the manner of purifying of the Jews. What purification are we talking about here?
Washing the hands.
Con. Exactly. Let's go to Mark 7. Mark 7, because this was the tradition of the elders. We'll start it off and I'll hit this real quick. And it say, then came together unto him the Pharisees and certain of the scribes which came from Jerusalem. So we're talking about the scribes and the Pharisees. And when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, that is to say, with unwashed hands, they found fault. Here's the Pharisees. So they saw them, and this is what we're talking about, sin, another example of what is sin and was not sin. They didn't wash their hands. Here you got these Pharisees and scribes, they found fault in it. But where is the law that said thou shalt not, or thou shalt wash thy hands, or thou shalt not? We confuse among our people a lot of things that aren't sin and ascribe sin to it. So this is how Yahushua is going to deal with that. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they wash their hands off, eat not, holding to tradition of the elders. So if you did not go through this ritual, you weren't holding the tradition of the elders, and that was shunned upon. So they had these pots that you would wash your hands before and after, and frequently. So that's what these pots was for, not for the purifying of hearts or a ceremonious. They were at a wedding, or ceremoniously cleansing for coming into a building or anything. It was for eating. And then it said, and when they come from the market, except they wash their hands, getting their meat, they eat not. So you get them. So that was our custom, that we eat not unless we wash our hands. And many of us keep that now. But if you don't, you sin not. And many other things there be, which this is to receive holding the washing of cups, pot, basins, vessels, and table. And then it says, then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, why walk not thy disciples according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed hands? So we had a custom there. And he answered and said unto them, well, has Elias prophesied of you hypocrites? As it is written, this people honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me, because the Most High is concerned about the cleansing of the heart. Howbeit in vain they worship me, teaching for doctrines, the commandments of men. So this is what's going on, and we really need to understand what sin is and what it's not. And sin is spelled out. Okay. So the other thing, let's look at what a firkin is. A firkin, going back, is a single firkin is 9 gallons. So this is how we knew there were others as well to come to this this wedding feast. So it says you had 6 pots containing 2 or 3 firkins. So if a firkin is 9 gallons, if we take the least, 2 firkins would be 18 gallons. Are we seeing that? If we say and if it was 3 firkins, it would be 27 gallons. So we'll take the least. So 6 pots with 18 gallons would have been 108 gallons. That's a whole lot of wine. And he said, fill them to the brim. That's a whole lot of wine. So that's 108 gallons of wine. I don't think I've ever even been to an event where it was that much wine. With that, so it was quite a few people to come, and that was there. So they ran out. And so let's go to 7.
Yahushua said unto them, fill the water pots with water, and they filled them up to the brim.
Here we have Elohim of plenty. He was saying, fill them up a quarter. Fill them up a third of the way. He said, fill up the pots and with water. This was the first miracle which Mary was expecting Christ to do something. And they filled them up to the brim. I mean, they didn't spare. You know what? The brim, almost when you fill something up to the brim, is like a bubble about ready to, if you put your finger in there, it will spill over. But they're spilling it up to the brim, just holding it. You think about that cauldron where it has that dip at the neck, is up beyond that. And he said unto them, go ahead, verse 8.
And he said unto them, draw out now and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bear it.
So now they took some of this wine out and they brought it to the governor of the feast. The question is, who is the governor of the feast? Who is that person?
To be the best man.
Good guess.
The father of the bride.
Most likely not. Let me explain it. It could be either of those could have been the best man could have been, and the father, but let's say who it was generally. Generally, it was a friend of the bridegroom, and his job was to put all the orders forth to make sure that all the needs, the food, the drink, and everything was good for that wedding. He was the person that the bridegroom chose. Like you say, it could have been the best man. He would give him the job. It could have been his father. Say, look, I need you to make sure everything is right with the food, with the entertainment, get all these things together. And that's why I was taken to the governor of the feast. So who this person was chosen by the bridegroom to make sure that there would be enough wine and food and everything for the people that would be there. Are we seeing that? So let's go to 9 and go on and unfold this.
When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it was, but the servants withdrew the water new, the governor of the feast called the bridegroom.
Okay, let's stop. Now, it says, and when the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine. Now, who understood that that was water first?
The disciples
And
and Yahushua.
the servants knew also.
Servants.
Those that poured water in there, they knew that it was water because they put it in there. Con. But it said now the governor of the feast didn't know, and it said and knew not whence it was. Why did he know not whence it was? Because he didn't order it. He didn't see to it when he's like tasting it. Where is this? He knew the supplies. He knew what was out, the quantity. He knew. That's why he took it, because he was responsible, number one, for making sure it was enough. And it was told specifically to take to it. He knew that they were running out because he had ordered all these. This ain't enough for all these people. So Christ told him, say, take it to him, because he didn't have enough. He didn't order enough. It wasn't a bad. He knew that they were in trouble. So he was told to take it to him. And that's why I say, but the servants which drew the water, they knew, but he didn't know. He didn't know. He's like, where's this coming from? He didn't order 109 gallons of wine. Are we seeing that? He knew he didn't have 6 pots, 6 of firkins of wine. It didn't come from him. He didn't order it, and he knew they was in trouble. And this, now we're going to go on. It said the governor of the feast called the bridegroom. Why? That's who hired him. He's like, you did something here that I'm unaware of. Usually we have women go out and they will establish, you talk to them, they set everything up. There's usually someone ahead of that wedding that sets everything up. Usually over here is a woman, right? Yeah, and they know everything. And you got to go to them for anything. That's who this governor of the feast is. He's that woman.
Wedding planner.
Yeah, that wedding planner. There you go. Now, let's go on and get in a little deeper to what happens. 10.
And said unto him, every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse, but thou hast kept the good wine until now.
Okay, so this is what he thought happened. The wine that he ordered was set forth first. He knew that, being the planner and everything. So he called the bridegroom, something is done here. He's telling him like a correction. Now, the good wine is set forth first, and then that which is worse, because they drank. But he's like, we set the good wine out, but you did something else, because he didn't see the miracle. He don't know. Now you're sitting out the good wine because he was in charge of making sure that happened, but he ran out of wine. So it said unto him, every man at the beginning, because he's a wedding planner, doeth set forth good wine. And when men have well drunk, they drunk it, then that which is worse. But thou hast kept the good wine until now. So, any questions? Let's go on to 11.
And manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him.
Okay. This beginning of miracles did Yahushua in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth what? His glory. And his disciples believed on him. Let's look at what what Christ came to do manifest. We're going to go back to 29 and 34. in John. Let me see here. We're going back to 1, what Christ was doing. It said, the next day, John seeth Yahushua coming unto him and saith, behold, the Lamb of the Most High, which taketh away the sin of the world. And it say, this is he whom I said, after me cometh a man, which is before me, for he was before me. And I knew him not, but that he should be made manifest to Israel. Therefore, I am come baptizing with water. What is this manifesting to Israel talking about?
Them actually seeing the works of Elohim come forth.
Absolutely. That he would show forth, he would demonstrate his power, he would make himself known, that he is the Messiah. So he came to show forth, as you see, to manifest himself to Israel, this power and this authority. And it's a John bear record saying, I saw the Spirit descending from heaven like a dove, and it abode upon him. Now, let's keep going. And I knew him not. John is saying this was his cousin. He didn't know who that Yahushua, his cousin, was him until, remember, watch this. And I knew him not, but he that sent me baptizing with water, the same saith unto me, upon whom thou shalt see the Spirit descending and remaining on him, the same is he which baptized with the Holy Ghost. And I saw and bear record that this is the Son of the Most High. That this is John, the greatest of all men, filled with the Holy Spirit from a babe. It wasn't even revealed to him until that time. Are you seeing that? Because he was shown with the dove before other men, because he's bearing that witness. He knew what he came for, but then when it was revealed to him, then he knew for himself. Are you seeing that? John said, I did not know him. I knew him not until he saw the Spirit descending, remaining on him. And then he knew that this was the Messiah. Now, what about this glory? What is this glory? We're going to go back. And see what this glory is. 11. And it says, manifest forth his glory. So what is that glory?
The power.
Absolutely. That's that supernatural power, the manifestation of his divine powers, whom all things, and remember in 1, we were talking about all things were made by him, controlled by him, and he's going to show forth dominion over all of that. Walking on water, defying gravity, walking through walls, ascending up to heaven, descending, disappearing, coming back, showing forth his glory in the Mount Figuration when he changed, talking to Elias and Moses. So he's going to show forth this glory. Now, remember the woman that Christ told her she know not what she worship. He said, but we know what we worship. Because she wasn't, who was the glory being showed unto up until that time? The glory of the Most High was being showed to the children of Israel. They had many experiences. So we knew who he was. And that's the whole thing. It's the same thing, Christ coming, that we coming to Israel first, that we may know who he is. And he said it himself that he came for us first. So he came unto us to manifest his glory. Do you have a responsibility to worship Elohim that you don't know? That's where the revealing of the Most High began to reveal himself to man, begin to show when he was saying back with Moses, tell him I am, I exist, because he had a responsibility in the knowing of his children so we could know him, who he was, so we could establish his glory in ourselves and be convinced to believe. Are we seeing that? What if you knew nothing of the Most High and you see nothing of his glory? Now everything testified, because he made the stars, the moons, the sky, the tree, everything that was made testify of his glory because he did it all. If there was nothing, then you are given an excuse not to believe. But because of these things, we're without excuse, because he manifests his glory, that he can be known. He's speaking to us. So this is what Christ came, so he could manifest his glory and we could believe. Let's go on to see with this last part. It say manifest forth his glory in this 11, and his disciples did what? Believed on him. Are you seeing that? Are you putting that? Signs and wonders. He came demonstrating, showing who he was, and opened up the door for this relationship that we could believe, not just words, idle words, but he was showing that he is that same Elohim from the beginning that created all things, and he was going to manifest his glory, manifest this to us in his glory and his power. Are we seeing that? That we could believe on him. Okay, let's go on to 12.
After this, he went down to Capernaum, he and his mother and his brethren and his disciples, and they continued there not many days.
Okay, what did we say? Christ was on the move, So after this, he went down to Capernaum. Now, Cana was about 12 miles north of Galilee, and now he was coming down to Capernaum. And so his mother was with him, the brother, the disciples. They continued there not many days. Go ahead.
And Jews Passover was at hand, and Yahushua went up to Jerusalem.
Okay. The Jews Passover. I'm not going to get into that right now, but I would like to touch on it later. Why he called, and the Jews Passover was at hand, and Yahushua went up to Jerusalem. Who else was following the Passover? Like you said, he came unto his own first. What other people was observing the Passover?
The Jews.
Yep, that's why the Jews Passover. Okay, let's go ahead to 14.
And found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves, and the changers of money sitting.
Okay, so when he went into the temple, this is the place of worship. Those that sold, and catch on the sold oxen, sold sheep, doves, and the changers of money. So we can look at this at the feast. Those that selling t-shirts, cups, hats, garbs. Are you seeing the same? Are you seeing this similitude or the same thing? We go to these feasts, those in the feast, those that selling, we're gonna liken this the garbs, the t-shirts, the hats. We do more selling at our feast. you got to see this. That's what we do the majority, and they want people to come to do this. Let's see how this pricks Yahushua. So where we are called to worship, this is going on. Back then, they're selling the oxen, the sheep, the dove. There was other, and you had the money changers there. I've been to many feasts. There is more stuff being sold there than you can get any place else. It's all being sold there. Con, don't only go to the feast. That's where it's happening. Huh? Go ahead.
You got every color there is at that former place.
Right.
You got every color.
Right. So this is what's happening. So at the temple, they were selling, and they had the money change it. This is the thing, but that's not what it was established for. Okay, but this is what happened then, and this is what happened now. Let's see how Yahushua handled this. 15.
And when he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overthrew the tables.
Okay. Now, just like we were talking, now he made a scourge. The scourge is what you get beat with, a small cords, okay? And he drove them all out. He drove out those animals that was doing it, and the people all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money and overthrew the table. Now, here, someone may even consider that an act of violence. What do we know about all of that? He sinned not. Throwing over a table, is that sin? Absolutely not. He poured out there. He wasn't doing it is a sin to hate, but he wasn't doing this out of hate. He had a love for what was going on, a love for what the Father had done, and the purpose of what temple was supposed to represent.
He was zealous.
He was zealous. That's it. We can see he was zealous towards it. So he had a fervent love. You see, and this is where we confuse it. Because if you go to one of those feasts and turn over, man, they're gonna be trying to beat you upside the head, calling you that devil is in here. And so, but you sinned not. They don't understand some that wicked. No, he was more zealous for the things of the Most High. That's why it displeased him so much that he acted, but that was without sin. If you say he was sinning, then you're lying. You're not sinning. This, I'm just trying to show this because we got folk that want to consider every time there's an act or someone does something, they act as if it's sin. Sin is specific. You know, oh, you said something, you sinning. You didn't say something, you sinning. Someone spoke, you know.
If I could add to that,
Go ahead.
it also plays into this worldly notion of, being offended by something and then being able to take up, take it up with that person and say, well, you offended me, so you did something wrong because I'm offended.
Absolutely. Because you are offended, don't mean that person sinned against you. Exactly. That's the point I'm trying to make. Exactly. And because that person is offended, don't mean you sinned against them. You didn't come out of malice heart to hurt someone, to purposely bring them down. Hey, you were offended, but no one sinned against you. You were offended in that. This was this was out of love. I told you. Now, someone can tell somebody something to hurt them too, not out of love, but we trust that the Most High knows the heart of man. We know where you coming from. The only one can call that is him. If someone says, I didn't do that out of malice, then because a lot of things are being called sin, and that's what I'm touching on. That Christ did a whole lot here. that would upset a whole lot of people, and he would have been called all kinds of names, but we know that it's not sin because it's Christ. Showing that those things can show forth. Just because you were offended, don't mean you were sinned against. Huh? So here, Christ drove them out. Okay. 16. Verse
And
16.
said unto them that sold doves, take these things hence, make not my father's house an house of merchandise.
Okay. We can say that about most of the feasts that happen. So take those that sold dove, take these things hence, and make not my father's house a house of merchandise. 17.
And his disciples remembered that it was written, the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up.
And there we're going to take a look at Proverbs. That's coming from Psalm 69. Psalm 69. Let me go to that in 9. For the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up. The love of the house, but those things that you're doing that reproaches this house has eaten me up. The reproaches of them that reproach thee are fallen upon me. So because the love that Christ had for what the house was supposed to represent, the temple, y'all in there selling, making merchandise of things, the money changes, this was eating up his spirit. And they were in reproach against what the temple was set up for, which was worship. And so now we see that he was doing that out of love, like Sister Darlene said, and it wasn't out of hatred. It wasn't out of sin, but it was out of love, and no sin proceedeth. Okay. Are we seeing that? If you beat your child, he do something wrong, you're not sinning. Matter of fact, says for you to not spare the rod, he would not die, but you correcting him. You're doing it out of correction, so the child can straighten himself up. Okay, let's go to
Also, the scriptures teaches that thou that the Most High does not chasten, he likens into a bastard. Basically,
right.
you're not the child, and he
Right.
doesn't love them.
Absolutely. So if chastisement don't come, you're likened unto a bastard child. And if he chastises you, it's because he loves you. And this is what's going on. And this is what we have to keep in perspective when we're living this life. You know, when things when we find ourselves in those situations and where the spirit of that is coming from. But absolutely correct. 18. Verse 18.
Then answered the Jews and said unto him, what sign showest thou unto us, seeing that thou dost these things?
Okay. So there was a change. Christ is coming. They had been selling in the temple and doing these things. Now, you know, Christ is establishing that what's going on is the status quo is wrong. And so he's establishing something else. So they're recognizing him and they're saying, what sign showeth unto us, seeing thou doeth these things? You're making this change. You're saying this isn't to be so. So they're adjusting that you are you the Messiah? The same thing they're asking about John. Then what sign do you show? What are you going to show us? What are you going to show us to demonstrate? Now, remember, he came to demonstrate his authority and his power to manifest himself to Israel, to show forth this. But this is how he answered those. 19.
And Yahushua answered and said unto them, Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up.
Now, Christ is in the temple. He just ran these those that were selling out of the temple. He said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. What was he talking about at this point? What temple?
His body.
Absolutely. But their mind wasn't on that. They were thinking about that temple that he was in, that he just ran them out. So he's saying that he assigned to show who he is and that he is the Son of Man. This is talking about, he's going all the way to the end, the resurrection, that they destroy that temple. They're going to raise them up. But in 3 days, he's going to rise again. And this will be a sure sign. And it said with infallible proofs, he showed forth himself. He came back for 40 days with demonstration showing that he has risen. The dead got up out of the grave. So he said, through all this ministry, if he went to the end of the matter, if you don't believe who I am, with all of these miracles that we're going to be reading forth and all the chronicles of what Christ did, if this doesn't show you that I am who I say I am, then you lost, because they're going to get to see that. Just like he told Nathaniel, he said, do you believe me because I said you was under the fig tree? Greater than this will you see. You will see him descending up to heaven in the end. So here, in 3 days, you're going to see you destroyed this temple, and he's going to raise it up again. He's going to get up out of it. And at this, you don't believe, you lost. So he goes on and he says, destroy this temple, and in 3 days, I will raise it up. How many days?
3.
3.
3 days. I mention this because someone is saying 7. I think that says 3. I believe I'm reading 3, not 7. There's another teaching based on, again, the law, where someone is teaching that it could not be 3 days because there is 8 days for the feast of bread, and it wouldn't have this. This says 3 days though, and they have changed that when it comes to Christ's crucifixion. They would even read in 3 days. Well, we know that means 7, or reiterated 7 days. See, that's when you really playing with scripture. But it says 3 days. He said 3 days, and we went over that. He would raise it up. 20.
Maybe verse 20 will say 7 days.
Yeah. Let's see verse 20. What that say? We're gonna hit it again. Go ahead. Verse 20.
Then said the Jews, 46 years was his temple in building, and wilt thou rear it up in 3 days?
Yeah, he said 3 days to get. They understood. They said, will you do this in 3 days? So it was 46 years. That temple, they were talking about that physical building, that it was reared up. And he said, would you gonna do this in 3 days? They got it. But this is the explanation of 21.
But he spake of the temple of his body.
Correct. Like the sister said, he was talking about his body as the temple. And he said he would not dwell in temples made with hands. So he's dwelling inside of us now. Khan. Now, 22.
When therefore he was risen from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this unto them, and they believed the scripture and the word which Yahushua had said.
When therefore he was risen from the dead. This is him. Remember, this was written, the chronicles of what Christ had done from John, and it said, therefore he was risen from the dead. His disciples remembered that what he had said unto them, and they believed the scripture and the word which Yahushua said. So even as he said he would, when he actually laid his life down and came back, his disciples remembered this, what he said he would raise it up in 3 days. 23.
Now, when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover in the feast day, many believed in his name when they saw the miracles which he did.
Okay, now we said again that this manifestation, or this is him manifesting himself to Israel and showing his glory. What would be the result of that?
Believers.
Right. And it say when they saw the miracles, this is supernatural power being demonstrated, which he did, they believed in his name. 24.
But Yahushua did not commit himself unto them, because he knew all men.
Now, even though they believed at this time, this is the wavering of man. Those same that believe on, many said, crucify him, because he knew what was in man. Even though they were at that time, they were saying, yeah, we believe on you. Those same would say, crucify him. So he didn't commit himself into that they are the good and faithful. And he knew that those same people would be the ones to say, crucify him, because he knew all men. He knew what was in the heart of them, even as he knew Judas would betray him and still chose him. 25.
And needed not that any should testify of man, for he knew what was in man.
He didn't need any to tell him what was going on with them men and how their hearts were deceitfully wicked, because he knew them. He knew what was in their heart. So he didn't need anyone to say, hey, you know that men is wavering. He knew the men, that he was dealing with. And that concludes John 2. Are there any questions, adaptation? Anyone? That was just 25 verses. Anyone have anything to add? The floor is now open.
I do.
Praise be to God. Good work, man.
I had a question.
Okay.
So I wanted to know, like, how did he go about picking out his disciples? If like you were saying earlier, if he was still in the midst of doing so when his mother requested him at the wedding, how did he go about picking his disciples if he knew what was in all men?
See, are you speaking specifically about Judas, knowing that he would betray him?
Well,
Never-
I was just speaking about like when he was picking picking his disciples, Nathaniel and Paul and the other people that you were discussing.
Oh, okay. I would put that in the providence of him, that he knew who would be walking and who to choose in providence according to his will, meaning that he knew before he even manifested those men and who he needed to be with him. Even as Judas was chosen, he knew that Judas would betray him. He needed Judas to be there so that the gospel could be fulfilled. He needed to go to the cross, and he needed to show what and it was divine providence is probably the only answer that I can give, that it was predetermined. Divine providence, that he knew he was going to have Simon Peter. He knew what was going to happen. That's why he could call it all forth when he said, when Peter was saying, I would never deny you, and he said, you will deny me thrice before the cock crow.
Okay, so
And he already knew. See, and that was his foreknowing, divine providence, knowing exactly what Christ wasn't surprised by anything. He wasn't surprised when they came to get him. He wasn't surprised by the cross. And he said, for this purpose have I come. And he was telling them, remember, he was telling the disciples what would happen. He said, today I will be lifted up. I would be betrayed into the hands of man. See, so all of these things he knew, and I will put to the divine providence of him knowing this, making his grand plan all fit and come together, if that makes sense.
and so basically like premeditated already. Well, not
Yeah, you could say that predetermined. Yeah.
Okay.
The scriptures do say we were predestined. So
Right.
I would say, based on the scriptures, the same way we're predestined for our purpose, that the Messiah understood, and who was predestined for what purpose.
Right.
Okay, I understand now.
And say for that predestination, we talked about it a lot before the foundation of the world, and people debate that a lot, because the argument that comes out of that, well, okay, if it's predestined, is there anything I can do if I'm going to hell? Has that been predestined, or if I'm not going to be saved, was that predetermined? Because it comes into the omniscience of the Most High, knowing what your end is, but having the ability to change. Say, can we change our fate? Because the Most High placed it on our hearts, or every man that says it's going to be without excuse, that he gives the ability to have an opportunity to go in eternity with him. He gives every man that opportunity, but if that man doesn't take it, the Most High already know that ending, because he's omniscient. He's omniscient. He knows all things. He knows my end. He knows the hairs on my head. He knows what's going to happen if I'm here, what I'm going to do 5 years down the road, or he knows what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. But we trust in him, and we still trust in him to be faithful. He knows those that are faithful and those that's not. At some point, Judas may have been earnest in his walk, but the Most High saw the end of that, and so did Christ. Whereas when money came along, he was so upset with the money and greedy, he changed. He wanted to betray Christ for the money. He just got ticked off that the sister had spent all on him, spent all the oil, and he kept the money. So now here's an opportunity for him to make a few pennies. And remember, he wanted him to be delivered safely. He said, take him safely. He thought he was going to make some change, but that led him down this, and Messiah said it would have been better if he not been born, because his act of betrayal. And he knew that. He knew his end.
I have a good example also.
Go ahead.
If you have a child and you set before them, a box of chocolates and maybe some apples and oranges, and knowing that your child doesn't even like chocolate, you already know that they're going to pick the fruit, but the fact that they chose the fruit, that still makes it their choice. Because it's
Con,
not like you told them. It's not like you told them, oh, you're going to do this and I'm making you do this. No, it actually is their choice. But you foreknowing that your child will choose, we'll just say good and evil, that you foreknowing that your child will choose good versus evil, it doesn't make you make them that choice, even though we know we were made um, before the foundation of the world. But the choice is still ours. But he already know what
con,
we're gonna do.
right. Con, the excellent example. Excellent. That hit it right on the nose. You know your children. He ain't gonna mess with the chocolate. He gonna get this. You put it out there. Yep. Excellent example. Anyone else? Okay, if not, I'll stop the recording.